Cheers, beer runners, and welcome to another edition of the iRunOnBeer Friday 5. Before we jump into this week's episode, I have two quick announcements. First announcement, I am currently in the process of running a giveaway for some Science in Sport energy gels. If you're not familiar with Science in Sport, they're an electrolyte energy gel company. Well, they make a lot of different sports nutrition, but specifically I've been testing some of their energy gels. I did a review of it earlier this week on YouTube if you want to check out that video. But basically what sets them apart from other brands is their gels are isotonic and have added water content. So when you're taking the gel, you'll notice they're a lot less thick than other gels consistency-wise. So it's a lot easier going down, but then also that water content makes the gel a lot more easily digestible, which means you're getting those nutrients a lot faster on the run. So definitely worth checking out if you are interested in entering the giveaway. Today is the very last day to enter. You just have to head over to my Instagram at iRunOnBeer, look for the post with the Science in Sport gels that says giveaway right on the post, and just tag some of your runner friends that you think would enjoy the gels as well. Each individual comment with a unique person tagged in it counts as an entry, and you can enter as many times as you want. So if you're interested in trying out the gels, make sure you take advantage of that giveaway today. Announcement number 2, you've heard me talk about BibRave in the past. I'm one of their ambassadors, one of the BibRave pros as we're known. And in the fall, every year, BibRave puts together their list of the top 100 races in the country, known as the BibRave 100. So where you come into play is the first part of this process is seeking out other runners to, of course, nominate their favorite races. We want to hear from you. So if you have a race that you've run that you loved, you wish more people knew about, or you wish got more recognition, this is your chance. Just go to bibrave.com/thebibrave100. Again, that's bibrave.com/thebibrave100. And you'll see the nomination form. You can nominate races for different categories, different distances, best theme, best weekend race experience. There's a few different categories you can nominate for. Nominations are open from now until the end of the month. And then after that point, they'll compile the list of finalists, which go through to the voting phase. You'll have the chance to vote on your favorite races, and then later this year you'll get to see that list of, again, the definitive list of 100 best races in the country. So if you're interested in nominating a race, just head to bibrave.com/thebibrave100 and let us know what you think. So now that the announcements are out of the way, let's jump into this week's topic. This week's topic is actually something that's been fresh in my mind a lot recently as I've started training for my first ultra marathon. Especially during my long runs, I find myself often in low points of the run just thinking, holy shit, 62 miles is so far. How am I going to accomplish this distance? How am I going to train for this? How is my body going to hold up on race day? Just questioning my ability, questioning how am I going to train for this? How am I going to prepare, etc. And one thing I've been reflecting a lot on is how I had a lot of these similar experiences, similar doubts, similar questions for myself when I first decided to run my first marathon. It was more than double, or I guess exactly double the longest distance that I had run at the time, the half marathon. But especially during the early days of training, the first few weeks, thinking, oh my God, 26.2 miles is so much farther than I've ever run before. How am I ever going to get there? And so that has actually been nice because I've been reminding myself, hey, I did get there. I made it through training. I ran my first marathon. I can get through this ultra marathon. It'll just take a little bit or a lot of bit more training to prepare myself for that. But so for this week's topic, I wanted to focus on my first marathon and some of my thoughts during that race, but also especially some things that I learned that I wish I knew before going into that race. Just little tips that make the race a lot more easy, a lot more manageable, especially for someone who's doing it for their first time. So for this week's episode of the Friday 5, I'm focusing on 5 of my best tips to help you successfully complete your first marathon. I figure this is the perfect time because people are just starting to train for their fall marathon season. There are plenty of big races coming up in the fall and plenty of marathons to choose from. So if you are training for your first marathon and getting ready to toe the line for 26.2 miles this fall, hopefully these tips help you get there. Tip number 1 for having a successful first-time marathon starts prior to the race, making sure that your timeline for race weekend is planned out very efficiently. And there are a few things that you should focus on. Number 1, make sure that you're focusing the days leading up to the race, that you're taking in plenty of water and fuel so that you are hydrated and ready to go on race day. Obviously, you don't want to overindulge, but you do want to make sure you have plenty of water stored up and plenty of fuel so that you're ready to go for race day. Number 2, in the day before the race, make sure you're spending as much time off of your feet as possible. It may not seem like it, but even just walking around the expo, sightseeing a new city, rushing around the airport, things like that do build up. They're gonna fatigue your legs. So if you can avoid it, just spend as much time chilling out, relaxing with your feet up. Like I said, save that energy for the race. Then as you move into the night before the race, make sure you're getting dinner early so that you have plenty of time to digest. Don't try anything new. Don't go crazy with a dinner. Don't go crazy carbo loading like Michael Scott in The Office eating that chicken Alfredo. Eat something that you know is going to sit well and you know is going to give you the right amount of fuel for race day. After dinner, get to bed early, make sure you have plenty of sleep, because the last thing that's very important to account for with your timeline is making sure you can get up early enough that you leave yourself plenty of time so you're not rushing around in the morning. One of the worst things you can do the morning of a race is wake up super anxious, feel like you're rushing around. You're not going to be in a good mental state by the time you get to the starting line. So get to sleep early so you can get up early, go through your morning routine, relaxed, even-keeled, get dressed for the race, go through your checklist, get to the race start line with enough time to do your warm-up, things like that, like I said, just so that you're able to move through the morning in a relaxed state as opposed to feeling rushed or anxious. So you've made it to the starting line, you're relaxed, you're ready to go, and my number 2 tip is to avoid one of the biggest mistakes I think so many first-time marathoners make, and that is avoid starting too fast. And even I would recommend starting slower than maybe you think you might need to. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, if I start the race fast, even if I slow down or hit the wall, I'll just be able to ride that cushion that I gave myself by running faster in the beginning. And that could not be further from the truth. If you burn too much energy early in the race and hit the wall, you might find it even more difficult just to put one foot in front of the other in those later miles in the race. It will be so much easier for you if you start the race a little bit slower, give yourself time to kind of warm up, get in the groove of the race, and then schedule times throughout the race to check in with yourself. You know what? If 3 miles in I'm feeling really good, I'll start to slowly speed up. 6 miles, half marathon, etc. Give yourself checkpoints and speed up just a little bit at each mile. Calculate your kind of goal paces throughout the race and plan to speed up throughout the race. Trust me, you will do so much better than if you start out too fast. What I did for my first marathon was just looked at, okay, here's my goal time divided by the 26.2, and figured out what my mile pace would have to be if I just ran at the same pace for the whole race. And then I started probably 30 to 45 seconds slower than that in the first couple miles and slowly built from there. And I missed my goal by 19 seconds, which killed me. But even though I didn't hit my goal exactly, I came pretty damn close, and I felt good after the race. I didn't kill myself. I never hit that dreaded wall. There were still points, don't get me wrong, where it was a marathon. I'd never run that far before. It was tough, but I never found myself like, oh my God, how am I going to finish this race? I can't believe I have X amount of miles left. For the most part, my mental state stayed pretty good, and I was able to flow through those last few miles because I still had the energy that I had saved from the beginning. So tip number 2, as much as you can, avoid starting too fast. If anything, start slower than you think you need to and build from there. You will thank yourself so much for having that extra energy when you get to those last 6 miles especially. Alright, so you've started the race, you're feeling good because you're running at a comfortable and maintainable pace, and my 3rd tip comes into play when you're starting to think about fueling for the race. So, if you've done your training appropriately and correctly, you've also trained and planned for your fueling strategy. You've looked at what fuel is available on course, what kind of gels they're going to have, what the beverages are going to be, water, Gatorade, what they might have, etc. You know exactly what they have. You're carrying anything with you that you want that they're not going to have. But my tip when it comes to fueling would be to stack your solid fuels earlier in the race. So obviously you can drink water, Gatorade, things like that throughout the entire race. But one thing that I found, and I read before my first marathon, was that it's a lot easier to take in solid nutrients like gels earlier in the race than it will be later on, because later in the race when you're starting to get really fatigued, your body's going to be pulling more and more blood, more and more resources away from your stomach, away from your digestive tract, so it's going to be harder for you to pull nutrients from the gels that you're taking really late in the race. It's a delicate balance. Obviously, you don't want to take all of your gels right away in the beginning, and gels are designed to be more easily digestible because they're knowing that this is going to happen later in endurance sports and things like that. But a strategy that's been really helpful for me is I tend to take gels. If I'm just running at a steady pace, I'm not going to be killing myself throughout the run. I'm just going out for a long run. I'll take a gel every probably like 4 to 5 miles or around 45 to 50 minutes. Depending on what I decide for that day, if I'm going to go on distance or time. But then in a race, when I know that I'm going to be struggling later in the race, I'm going to be using more energy, I might start off taking those gels every 30 minutes or every 3 miles, and then start to space it out from there. Again, I'm getting all the nutrients that I need, but I'm stacking some of those electrolytes earlier in the race, some of those carbs, so that I'm building up stores so that later in the race I have some energy to pull from. Again, you don't want to just take a bunch at the beginning and then stop, but just putting those intervals a little bit closer earlier in the race and then spreading them out as you go along so you can build up some more of those energy stores so that you're not having any digestive issues or things like that later in the race. So like I said, test how it works for you in training. this is the time to try it out, try different gels, try different nutrients, things like that, test out gel strategies, but it's really worked for me to stack some of those gel intakes earlier in the race so that I don't have to worry about it later on. Tip number 4 also has to do with aid stations that are going to be on course, but has nothing to do with the type of fuel sources or liquids or whatever are going to be there. But my tip is just every aid station that you pass through, or even every other, whatever you prefer, take a walk break. It's not going to kill your time that much. You'd be surprised actually how little the difference is if you were to walk through an aid station as opposed to run through an aid station. It's really insignificant, especially in your first race. You shouldn't be too concerned about it. But what walking through an aid station will do for you is it will just give your legs a quick chance to kind of re-energize, rest a little bit, take some of the pressure off your muscles, and just give you a chance to recoup and just get ready to start off again and start strong again for the next leg. And because usually those aid stations are pretty evenly spaced out on a course, you're giving yourself regular intervals where you can, like I said, just take that quick walk break. You've earned it. Trust me, you're running your first marathon. It's okay to walk. You don't have to run the entire time. Your time is still going to be great if you only walk through the aid stations, but just giving your legs that little break will, again, just help you save up some of that energy to make sure that you're finishing the race strong. I know so many people who are just like gung-ho, I have to run the whole thing, walking is weak. Trust me, it's not. So many professional runners do it as well. And just like I said, using those aid stations is just quick intervals to just give your legs a quick break so that you can re-energize. It'll also just be a lot easier if you are taking in any kind of nutrition to just do it while you're running so you're not dumping water down your face. But just gives you a chance to re-energize and get ready to start off on the next leg of the race as strong as possible. Fast forward to the future. Everything went according to plan. Everything's gone off without a hitch. Your training, your preparation, everything went perfectly. You're standing at the finish line having just completed your first marathon. You're thinking, oh my God, I did it. I feel amazing. I can't believe I actually ran my first marathon. Maybe you're thinking, oh my God, iRunOnBeer, thank you so much for all your incredible videos. Your tips, especially for my first marathon, really helped me to feel energized and finish strong so late in the race. Regardless of what you're thinking, you have now just finished your first marathon, and my 5th and final tip for you is to celebrate that accomplishment accordingly. In the grand scheme of things, grand scheme of all the people that live on this planet, only a small percentage are ever going to do what you have just done, and that demands celebration. So whatever you prefer to do, make sure that you celebrate this race accomplishment accordingly. My personal favorite is, first and foremost, hit the post-race party, the post-race celebration. If there's free alcohol, great, that's my favorite. Free food, anything I can take advantage of there. Then I usually like to go out to a local brewery, take in plenty of food, pop back to the hotel, Airbnb, maybe get in a little nap, and then keep the party going later in the night. For me, my personal favorite is, especially if I'm running a big race, I like to bring a lot of people with me. I love racecations, so I tend to bring a lot of friends, family along for the ride. Maybe a couple of us ran the race, but then that night, just surrounded by people you love, telling stories about the race, drinking plenty of alcohol. Hell, I've heard that alcohol is great at breaking up lactic acid. No idea if that's true or not. Didn't need to do any research. One person told me one time, that's good enough for me. But you have just run your first marathon, and you should celebrate the hard months of training, the early mornings, the late nights, telling yourself or restricting what kind of food you're eating, restricting that, not having that extra drink before you have a long run in the morning, things like that. You made it through 16 to 18 weeks of brutal training, and it has just paid off in your first marathon. So make sure after you finish the race that you take the time to celebrate that accomplishment, because it is incredible. Maybe it's addictive, maybe you're going to run another one, but regardless of what the future holds, celebrate the now. You have just finished your first marathon, and that is amazing. So whether you are just starting to think about running your first marathon, or maybe you just started training for your first marathon this fall, hopefully these 5 tips help make sure that it's a successful race for you. Like I said, the goal of these tips is really just to make sure that you maintain and preserve energy throughout the race so that you have a strong race, avoid hitting that wall later in the race, cross the finish line strong and ready to celebrate that accomplishment. So congratulations if you even have just made the commitment to run a first marathon. That's a huge step. The training is going to be tough, but you can do it, and hopefully these tips will help. Just as a reminder, don't forget today is the last day to enter that Science and Sport giveaway. If you're interested, the link to that is down below in the show notes. The BibRave 100, if there's a race you want to nominate for one of the best races in the country, make sure you do so before the end of the month. But other than that, congratulations as always for making it through another week. Congratulations on making it to Friday. Enjoy the day and celebrate the weekend accordingly. Cheers!